You know, George Strait's name is linked to country music history, whether it's love for your family, your wife, your husband, your kids, your dogs, your cats, your horses, or anything else. A man whose smooth voice and classic hits have made people love and respect him for decades. Strait, who is known as the King of Country, has long been praised for both his singing skills and what seems to be a stable personal life. But behind that polished public image is a shocking story that many fans didn't see coming. A brief, shocking split that shocked the country music world. What could have made the wife of such a well-known person file for divorce so quickly? Was it a betrayal that was kept secret, a fight that was kept quiet, or something much more involved than anyone thought? A lot of whispers and stories were going around, and people had a lot of questions. Replies. How did a man whose songs were mostly about love and loyalty end up in the middle of such a big change in his life? George Strait changed the way country music was played without ever leaving Texas. When you think of the best country music stars, one name comes to mind. George Strait. Strait was more than just a country star. His voice was smooth as whiskey, and he was as steady as the Texas hills. He became a living representation of the soul of the genre. George Harvey Strait was born on May 18, 1952, in Pottet, Texas. He grew up in the small town of Pyel, which is not near Nashville or the fame and glamour of those cities. His early years were marked by simplicity, hard work, and the rough beauty of Texas. Strait's father, who was both a math teacher and a rancher, taught him the importance of being disciplined and humble, which would define him throughout his life and work. When Strait was in high school, he joined a rock garage band and started playing music. It wasn't in a studio or on a big stage. However, he didn't find his true calling until he joined the U.S. Army and was sent to Hawaii. He began singing country music there with a band called Rambling Country that was paid for by the Army. Strait went back to Texas after his service and studied agriculture at Southwest Texas State University, which is now Texas State University. But his love for music only grew stronger while he was in school. His country band, Stony Ridge, became known as the ace in the whole band after he joined it in 1975. They played in Texas's small bars and honky-tonks, slowly becoming known for their real sound, which was based on old-time country music. When George Strait signed with MCA Records and put out his first song, Unwound, in 1981, it was a big deal. The song was a huge hit and reached number 16 on the Billboard Hot Country Songs list. In the same year, he put out his first record, Strait Country, which showed off his neo-traditionalist style at a time when country music was becoming more like pop music. People who wanted a classic country sound like Strait's clean, simple sound, which included steel guitars, fiddles, and honest songs. He didn't dress in sparkly clothes or try to be liked by a lot of different types of people. He was real, and that realness became his brand. Strait would become even more famous as a country music star over the next 10 years. Hits like Amarillo by Morning, The Chair, and Oceanfront Property were taken from albums like Straight from the Heart, 1982, Right or Wrong, 1983, and Does Fort Worth Ever Cross Your Mind, 1984. It wasn't just radio hits. They turned into songs. Stories set to music that showed how complicated love, sadness, longing, and life in a small American town can be. He stood out because he could show strong emotions in a subtle way. Strait sang with grace and restraint, unlike other artists who relied on showmanship or vocal gymnastics. His voice wasn't flashy, but it was something I would never forget. Strait was known as the King of Country in the 1980s and 1990s. And not just because of how well he did in the music business. He stood for stability in a field that changed a lot with the tides of pop culture. Strait never went too far from the roots of folk music. And yet, he managed to stay important year after year. His songs always got to the top of the charts. His tours filled up stadiums to capacity. His image as a real, down-to-earth artist only grew. Hits in this genre include I Cross My Heart, Check Yes or No, Carrying Your Love With Me, and Run. Each one shows a different side of Strait's storytelling magic. Strait had an effect on more than just music, though. He also paved the way for traditional country music to become popular again, and a new group of artists looked to him as an example of how to be successful without giving up anything. Artists like Alan Jackson, Randy Travis, and later Chris Stapleton and Cody Johnson have all said that Strait had an impact on their careers, listing his style, work ethic, and honesty as examples. Strait also tried acting and did well with it. He played the lead role in the 1992 movie Pure Country. Some critics didn't like the movie, but the soundtrack became one of his most popular records. Strait's songs like Heartland and I Cross My Heart helped him reach a wider audience and solidified his international appeal without leaving his country roots behind. Strait was once again acting in his own way. He never rushed or tried to follow trends, he just did what he was good at. George Strait's insistence on privacy, the tragedy of his daughter, and his failure to speak out caused some quiet controversy. George Strait's work has often been marked by unwavering consistency and the grace of a man who didn't seem to be affected by the ups and downs that come with being famous, but the truth is more complicated. The king of country music built his career on heartfelt songs and traditional values. But he also had to deal with personal problems, painful losses, and subtle criticisms that made his otherwise perfect image more complex. Strait's life wasn't often in the news for scandals or dramatic events, but the quiet loads he carried and the choices that some people had mixed feelings about show in the background. Strait's silence often made fans wonder what was going on. He was very protective of his private life and rarely opened up in interviews. He also avoided talking about personal things and kept a professional distance from the press. Many people thought that their shyness was admirable and a nice change from how famous people are these days, but some critics and onlookers saw it as coldness or emotional distance. Strait chose to stay calm in public, while other stars talked about their problems freely. This made many people wonder what was really going on behind the calm exterior. In 1986, Strait's 13-year-old daughter Jennifer died in a terrible car accident. It was one of the worst and most important events in his life. He and his family were saddened by the loss, and it changed how he thought about fame and privacy after that. After she died, Strait pretty much stopped talking about personal things with the public. Interviews stopped happening often, and when they did, they couldn't ask about his family at all. From a human point of view, this wall of silence was very reasonable, but it sometimes got in the way of the public's and the media's desire for openness. For years, some people in the business wondered if Strait's lack of emotion was a way for him to deal with stress or a deliberate way to control his image. Strait was able to handle the changing styles of country music with some of the same discipline. Artists like Gar Brooks and Shania Twain used more dramatic crossover styles that mixed pop and rock elements, but Strait stuck to more traditional sounds. Purists saw him as a hero for his unshakable commitment to neo-traditional country, but others saw him negatively because they thought he was unwilling to try new things. Some people who work in the music business said that Strait's impact led to a more conservative tone in mainstream country music, one that emphasized a certain idea of authenticity and didn't allow for more experimentation or sound diversity. The talk about inclusion makes his reputation even more complicated. The Strait songs and public image have always been associated with old-fashioned Americana, ranch life, rodeos, and strong men. Aside from not being overtly political or controversial, his work didn't really deal with problems of diversity, inclusion, or social justice. As activism and cultural commentary become more integrated into music, some saw Strait's silence as a missed chance. They said that as a leader in the genre, he had a platform that could have been used to support underrepresented voices in country music, especially as issues of race, gender equality, and LGBTQ+ representation became more important. In the background, there were also rumors that Strait seemed cold toward fans and the media. Many people liked how polite and professional he was, but he wasn't seen as the most approachable star. Some of his friends loved meet and greets and being close to their fans, but Strait was known for staying away from them. Some fans wondered if his modesty made him feel alone, while others praised how he didn't let fame take over his life. In any case, it added to his mystery, which made him interesting and sometimes hard to understand. In the last few years of his career, Strait's weak or non-existent political comments caused some problems. Strait was very political in public, but not as much as some other country stars who spoke out about controversial topics. Some people praised him for staying out of the fight, while others said he should have used his huge platform to speak out about issues that affected his fans and the country as a whole. Critics saw his silence as a sign of passivity at a time when public figures were being asked to take a stand more and more. It was in line with his quiet dignity. Another problem with Strait's image came from the people who loved him in the business. Country music started to realize that it didn't have enough women and artists of color. This led to conversations about how the genre's traditional leaders, Strait being seen as a symbol of these people, helped make the music scene exclusive. There is no proof that Strait actively fought against change or diversity in the genre, but some people saw his success and impact as part of a larger trend that kept the mainstream country lane pretty narrow for decades. People sometimes wondered what Strait might be hiding because of how well he controlled his public image. These days, people value honesty more than ever, so the lack of flaws or drama made some people wonder if there was more going on beneath the surface than fans ever saw. No big scandals ever came to light, but the puzzle itself was sometimes the news. Some people see a lack of openness as a problem in and of itself. Not because it hides wrongdoing, but because it makes people want to know more about the man behind the music, the unseen force behind George Strait's 5-decade rule. While this was going on, Norma Strait may not have been singing to packed arenas or topping the country music charts, but her quiet presence has been an important part of George Strait's life and work, making him one of the most famous people in country music. George has been the public face of their story a lot of the time, but Norma has had a huge impact on the man who would become king of the country. She gave him strength, security, and honesty. Behind the scenes of a world built on fame and performance, her story shows how loyal, strong, and powerful a partner can be. She grew up in the same small town as George Strait. Her real name is Norma Voss. They met in high school and fell in love, but their relationship wasn't always smooth. They broke up for a short time after high school, but fate brought them back together. George hasn't said much about their relationship, but he does like it. In an interview, he said that asking Norma to marry him was the best thing he had ever done. There was a wedding in Mexico in December 1971 that made their relationship stronger and would last for more than 50 years. When George joined the U.S. Army soon after they got married, things changed dramatically in Norma's life. George was in the 25th Infantry Division in Hawaii, where the couple lived and worked. At this point in time, George started playing with a band called Rambling Country that was funded by the Army. This was the start of his future music career. Norma was there for him from the start, supporting his dreams while adjusting to life in the service and as a young mother. Their bond and commitment to each other grew stronger when their daughter Jennifer was born in 1972. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, George's music career began to take off. Norma stayed by his side even as the attention got brighter. She didn't want to be famous and didn't do many interviews or public events. But she was always in George's personal life, giving him a strong emotional anchor in the crazy world of the entertainment business. Friends and people who knew George well say that Norma helped him relax and keep his feet on the ground when the pressures of fame would have otherwise crushed him. Aside from being a friend, Norma also helped George make decisions about his art. People close to the couple say that George often talked to her before making big career moves, but she was never officially in charge of his work. Over the years, her insight, which came from having a deep understanding of George as a person and as an artist, was very helpful. Norma's voice was one of the few that George could trust without any doubt in a business full of handlers, managers, and leaders. It was clear how strong their marriage was when bad things happened. Jennifer Strait, their 13-year-old daughter, died in a car accident in 1986. The Strait family was very sad about the loss. Both George and Norma were deeply affected by the tragedy, but they lent on each other to get through it. In honor of their daughter, the couple set up the Jennifer Strait Memorial Foundation, which has helped many children's causes across Texas. Even though they never talked about the death in public, the way they remembered Jennifer showed how deeply they were sad and how strong they were. Norma's character was shown again by how she was able to get through that storm without being seen by everyone. Strong, private, and never changing. When their son George Bubba Strait Jr. was born in 1981, Norma also took on the job of mother. In some ways, Bubba followed in his father's footsteps. He became a competitive rodeo cowboy, asked for my songs to be played on the radio, and finally became a songwriter who worked on some of George's later albums. Norma continued to support George and Bubba with grace and care over the years. She only went to rodeos, events, and award shows when it meant something to her, not because she had to or because she felt obligated to, but because she loved her family. The obstacles and controversies that no one talks about that led to Norma Strait. There have been some problems with Norma Strait's marriage to one of the most popular people in country music. Even though she isn't very well known, Norma's life has been affected by privacy problems, grief, and the stresses of living in the spotlight. One of the problems Norma has had most throughout her marriage is that it's hard to keep her privacy. Because George Strait is so famous, the media naturally paid attention to him, but Norma has always decided to stay out of the spotlight. People's desire for privacy has sometimes run into problems with the media and the public's interest, making it hard to keep the balance. The media's constant attention has sometimes led to intrusive rumors about her personal life and how the Strait family works, especially when things are tough. Norma has kept quiet to protect herself and her family, but it has been taken the wrong way sometimes, as aloofness or secrecy, which has spread stories instead of stopping them. When their daughter Jennifer died tragically in 1986, it was a very hard time for Norma and George. Even though they kept their sadness to themselves, it was impossible to avoid the public eye. There was some disagreement about how much the family should tell the press about Jennifer's death. Some thought it was honorable that Norma chose to grieve away from the public eye, while others thought it left fans and the media guessing. This lack of communication led to many guesses, some of which were not true, about the family's inner pain and how they dealt with it. Many people understood and supported Norma's choice to use her grief to do good through the Jennifer Strait Memorial Foundation. However, it was still hard to balance public interest with private sadness. Norma is also linked to the stress of living under the fame of a famous person. It seemed like Norma's life and identity were often overwhelmed by George Strait's fame as a country music star. Some critics and onlookers have pointed out how hard it must be for her to balance her own wants and needs with the needs of being a supportive spouse. She didn't try to be famous. This made people wonder what her job was besides being the traditional rock of the family. What kind of power did she have behind the scenes? What did she do to balance her own goals and problems with helping George's career? Because she is private, these questions are mostly ignored, but they show that. How hard it is to be married to a star. People have also talked about Norma's part in managing George's job choices or having an effect on them. Even though she wasn't officially in charge, people who worked there say she was a trusted confidant and talking board. But this has sometimes caused trouble with people who thought that her advice, while helpful, might have restricted George's options or caused problems with professional managers and agents. Getting personal advice and business goals to work together isn't always easy. And while most people liked Norma's impact, there were some who didn't. People have sometimes gotten the wrong idea about Norma because she doesn't get much attention. For example, the couple's decision to get married in Mexico in 1971 has led to many questions over the years about why they decided to have a destination wedding and whether it had anything to do with family or culture. What's really going on is easier to see. They wanted a celebration that was private and not seen by anyone else. The fact that the wedding was kept secret led to a lot of talk, showing that even the most private events can become news. Over the years, Norma's decision to stay away from public interviews and media events has been called cold or distant by some. However, many of her fans and friends see it as an admirable decision to protect her family's health. Because she doesn't want to talk to the media, when scandals or stories happen, she usually doesn't say much or anything at all, which can leave people without enough information. To all of my fans who have backed me, I'd like to say that I think it's time for me to stop touring. Because of this silence, fake or exaggerated stories have sometimes been able to spread without being stopped. Norma has also had to deal with the difficulty of taking care of her family during times of intense public scrutiny, especially when George Strait's work became legendary. Family life was strained by all the traveling, recording, and award shows. As a mother and wife, Norma had to handle both her husband's public image and the effects of his busy lifestyle on her own life. Finding the right balance between this and her own needs has been a quiet battle that she has felt deeply but rarely talked about. People have also talked about Norma's connection with their son, George Bubba Strait Jr., who went in a different direction and became a rodeo competitor and then a songwriter. It wasn't always easy to support a son who had a different but still public job. Norma has been praised for always being there and being an inspiration. Still, some people wonder how the family's desire to live up to the Strait tradition might affect the way they interact with each other. George Strait and Norma Strait's relationship has been amazing, full of love, respect, and teamwork for over 50 years. They went from being small-town sweethearts to being country music's strongest couple. They met in high school and fell in love in the small Texas town of Puyallup. A simple start that led to a bond that will last a lifetime. When they met when they were teenagers, they quickly became close and would stay close through all of life's ups and downs and fame. In the beginning, they had a normal teenage passion, but they were also deeply committed to each other, and time and events would not change that. They got married in a small ceremony in Mexico in December 1971. This choice showed that they wanted to keep their relationship secret and close to each other. This choice made early on showed Norma's lifelong desire to stay out of the spotlight, helping George's business grow from the background instead of trying to become famous herself. While George Strait was stationed in Hawaii with the U.S. Army, his career began to take shape. Norma was there for him the whole time. When George played with the Army-sponsored band Rambling Country, Norma handled the difficulties of being a young mother and being in the military with charm and strength. In 1972, during this time, their daughter Jennifer was born, adding new joy and responsibilities to their young family. Norma played a very important part in these growing years. George needed emotional stability and support from her as he went through his time in the war and his dreams of becoming a country music star. They were truly partners in everything they did because they shared ideals like faith, loyalty, and commitment. They respected each other's jobs and identities, which was another important part of their relationship. George never pushed Norma into the spotlight because he knew she wanted to be alone and have a normal life. In contrast, Norma loved being a wife and mother and supported George's work goals without trying to become famous herself. This balance helped them handle the tough parts of being famous without losing sight of what was important to their family. This caring setting also helped their son, George Bubba Strait, Jr., who was born in 1981. Growing up with parents who put family unity above all else, Norma's involvement in Bubba's life, especially as he followed rodeo and songwriting, showed how close the family was. A terrible event, the death of their daughter Jennifer in 1986, put their bond to the test. This terrible event could have broken their bond, but it instead made them closer. As a way to deal with their sadness, they turned to each other for support and started the Jennifer Strait Memorial Foundation in her honor. Norma's ability to deal with such a deep loss in a private but helpful way showed how strong she was and how well their marriage was built. Even though it hurt, they stayed together, showing a level of loyalty that is both rare and inspiring. George Strait's wife Norma and him have problems with their lifestyle because he is working less. Through the years, George and Norma Strait have stayed committed to each other, even during the early years of their relationship and the short time they were apart. Their strong relationship shows how strong and resilient people can be, which is something that many pairs want to achieve. Even though they've been married for a long time, it has its ups and downs, especially as they go through new stages of life together. Just like any other long-term relationship, the Straits faces problems as things change, people's needs change, and their goals shift. Recently, George has decided to slow down his busy touring schedule. This has changed some things in their relationship, which shows how even long-term couples have to make changes as they get older and their goals change. After a lifetime of traveling, George's choice to ease up on the demands of the job is understandable and even expected. Touring for decades, performing in front of millions of fans, and keeping up the energy level needed for live shows is a hard way of life that is hard on the body, mind, and emotions. As an artist who has spent most of his adult life on the road, George's decision to slow down gives him a chance to spend more time with his family and do other, perhaps quieter, more private things. At this point in his work and life, he should enjoy the fruits of his success and spend more time with his family, especially at their big ranch in Texas, where he can get away from the constant demands of fame and relax. Norma, on the other hand, has said that she feels differently about this change in living. While George enjoys the peace and quiet that their 8,000 square foot ranch provides, Norma is said to find the site too remote for her taste. Norma likes the social parts of living in or near a bigger city because she has spent a lot of her life in or near busy towns. The chance to hang out with friends, go to social events, and do fun things like going to lunch or getting involved in community life. She feels connected and full of life when she's with other people, which might be harder to find in a more remote location. This difference in tastes happens a lot in relationships, especially when one person has lived a busy, social, and traveling life and the other person likes peace and quiet. For George, these changes meant, after all these years of being on the road, it's time to slow down a bit and enjoy the simpler things. Norma has been my rock through everything, and now it's up to us to make sure we both find happiness in this new stage. In a rare public statement, Norma agreed, "I love our ranch and the peace and quiet, but I also miss the excitement of the city and the chance to hang out with friends and make new ones. They say, we're still figuring it out together." This difference hasn't caused problems in their marriage or a divorce. In fact, George and Norma are still together and help each other out, but this has caused what some might call a speed bump in their otherwise smooth marriage. There are natural tensions like these because it's hard to balance different wants in a shared life. This is something that all couples go through at some point. George wants a slower ranch-based life, while Norma wants to stay involved in a livelier social scene. Their next steps will require them to find common ground and work together to reach a solution. As you try to find a balance that works for both of you, it's like a careful dance.